And the old class conflict theory didn't fly because the working class never wanted to engage in a bloody revolution and take over the factories. They just wanted a pay raise and better working conditions. And so the Marxists of the day were very upset that the working class never bought into this. So what do? Well, they set up a different type of class struggle. It's no longer the capitalist class and the working class. Now it's the oppressor class and the oppressed class. And basically the oppressors are white heterosexual males, and the oppressed is everybody else in the literature. And the goal, so because the failure of the working class to overthrow capitalism, the goal now is the destruction of Western culture, because some of the theorists, people like Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, and George Lukács, his real name is Georgi, but I'll call him George Lukács, they needed a change of strategy. And their theory was that the reason why the working class did not embrace Marxist revolutions was that Western culture and Christianity blinded them to the Marxist truth. They claimed that the combination of Western culture, which of course would include classical liberalism, the philosophy of classical liberalism, and the institutions of capitalism themselves, and Christianity, created what Lukács called a hegemonic power which maintains the consent to the capitalist order. So he said the working class was too attached to Western culture and too attached to Christianity to be able to be convinced into destroying the capitalist order. Therefore, we must destroy Western culture and destroy Christianity. And otherwise, we will never be able to have our cultural revolution. And one good thing that Mussolini did is he imprisoned Gramsci. So he said, give him a hat tip to Benito Mussolini for doing that after he started saying things like this. And of course, Gramsci is known for Western culture and Christianity must be destroyed by a long march through the institutions of schools, media, churches, entertainment industry, etc. And I began noticing this, the real success that the Gramsciites and the cultural Marxists were having in the 1980s, when that great intellectual giant Jesse Jackson led a group of 500 or so chanting students at Stanford. They were chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western cultures, Western civ has got to go." At the time, Stanford University was teaching a course in Western civilization, and they wanted to get rid of it, which they did. They got rid of it, and they replaced it with a course called Race, Class, and Gender Studies. And so they succeeded in that. Around the same time, there's a wealthy oil family from Texas, the Bass family, gave $20 million to Yale University, which was sort of the family alma mater there, and to endow some professorships in teaching various aspects of Western civilization at Yale. And the faculty, not every single faculty member, but a big portion of the faculty revolted against this, and ended up they had to give the money back. They gave $20 million back. And at the time, it was the biggest donation ever in the history of Yale University, biggest private donation. So if there are any members of the Bass family watching, I'm looking at they're on the internet, send the money to the Mises Institute. If they're out there on the internet. We will have a degree granting program in all aspects of Western civilization, if you like. We could do that with $20 million. Okay, so Stanford replaced that. They gave the money back at Yale. The Yale faculty condemned this proposal as it was, quote, dead white European male academic agenda. And so they called for more what we need is more multicultural studies, they said. And for those of you who are not too familiar with the multiculturalism in the academic context, it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means hiring socialists of different cultures, an Asian socialist, an African socialist, different culture, an Indian socialist. So long as the faculty are all socialists, we want them to be from different cultures. That's basically what multiculturalism means in the academic world. Now, one of the heroes of the, like I said, of the today's cultural Marxists who run the entire educational system in America is the Hungarian communist George Lukács, and he got a job in 1918 as Commissar of Culture in Hungary, and he introduced sex education there, and his purpose was to destroy traditional sexual morals as a part of their plan to destroy Christianity. The project was to destroy Christianity so that the great Marxist revolution of the working class could take place. The Hungarians didn't really go for it, so they kicked out the communists. They totally kicked them out of the government, and that didn't quite work out that way. And of course, this is all a part of, what this became was the Frankfurt School. Basically a gang of Marxist misfits and psychopaths, mostly from Germany and a few Italians in there. And they came to America, and they went, of all places, and many of them ended up in Santa Monica, California in the 1950s. And in the 1950s, Santa Monica must have been such a beautiful place. But they were just angry and hateful and disgusted. They just hated everything. So they wrote articles and books about how horrible American society was, especially because it was the most capitalist society around at the time. And they're just miserable, and they wanted everybody else to be miserable at the same time about this. And so it was originally called the Institute for Marxism, but they decided that Marxism had kind of a bad name, so they didn't quite, they eventually called it progressivism or, whatever, but that's what they called it. When they decided, let's just call ourselves the Frankfurt School, because who the heck knows what that is? But the Institute for Marxism is a little different. Okay. And so the goal of the Frankfurt School is that they said that, people live under repression in Western culture and must be liberated from this repression. And so they use such techniques as lionizing people like Bruce Jenner in a miniskirt and high heels. That's supposed to be, that sort of thing is supposed to liberate us from our cultural repression. That's our new hero, new role model for society, people like that. Okay. The role of education, they said, is not to educate, but to instill the right values. Okay, the right values. And of course, when you see these scenes on college campuses now, when Charles Murray showed up at Middlebury College at the invitation of a philosophy professor there, they had these muddle-headed little students showed up screaming in his face, calling him a fascist and a Nazi and all these things. And the female professor who invited him, one of them grabbed her by the hair and jerked her so hard she injured her neck and had to go to the hospital, an emergency room. And they fled the campus. Charles Murray and this professor fled the campus, and these students chased them by car to where they were going, because they've been taught since grade school that these people are not only wrong, but they're evil. And that's always been the Marxist method of argumentation. They would rarely argue with us. They would just accuse us of being capitalist tools. Case closed. You don't really believe what you're saying. You're an intellectual prostitute. You're a capitalist tool. And so this is the modern version of capitalist tool. You're the tool of fascists or some evil group. And so therefore, if you're a Nazi, well, of course you need to be eradicated. We don't want Nazis in our society. So that's what they're taught. That's why you have, they use these young people as useful idiots. And I've seen it my whole career. When I began teaching in 1979, I noticed that the older leftists on campus would always go after sort of the dumber students like that. I won't mention the majors, but education would be one of them. They would go after and convince them to become radical rabble rousers rather than going to the library and studying and getting a good education. Okay. Another hero of this movement is Herbert Marcuse. And he wrote a book, Eros and Civilization, which became sort of the Bible of the sexual revolution of the 60s. And one of the things he wrote in the book is, don't work, have sex. That's good advice for teenagers, I guess. Good career advice. And this is part of his just attack on the whole idea of working. That's what makes that capitalist economy work, doesn't it? Work. So demonizing work. And he advocated what was called polymorphous perversity. Because remember, the goal was always to destroy Western culture and Christianity. And it was Marcuse who wrote an essay that has been taken to heart by this movement, in which he talked about liberating tolerance. He made the case for the abolition of free speech among people who would advocate Western civilization, the values of Western civilization, including classical liberal ideas, free market economy, and so forth. And because these are the ideas of the oppressor class. The oppressor class created these ideas and promulgates these ideas. And so, therefore, on college campuses especially, he said, it's only the oppressed who deserve free speech. So when you see these little terrorists doing things like they did at Middlebury College or Berkeley, they think they're taking the moral high road by censoring alternative viewpoints. They don't think they're being fascist by destroying freedom of speech and academic freedom. They think that they'll tell you they're taking the moral high road, because after all, if you believe in such things as free speech, constitutionalism, and all, you're a fascist. You're taught to be a fascist.